Miami Modern Architecture, or MiMo. It's an exotic style of architecture that sprang up in South Florida post-World War II. You could tell these hotels, motels, houses, and other structures by their exuberance and flamboyance. There was one architect who was so prolific and creative that he is now dubbed one of the great masters of MiMo, Norman Giller. Author of the book MiMo, Miami Modern Revealed, Randall Robinson came upon Norman Giller's name in the research for his book.
I guess back in the late 90s, I was really getting into the post-war architecture in Miami Beach. I would research the building cards of the buildings, which would tell you the dates of construction and the architects. And the name Norman Giller just kept coming up over and over and over. It was just something remarkable. It was just, I couldn't believe how often that name came up. So I knew, you know, after not too long, that there was really a story that needed to be told there.
The story is now being told by the 89-year-old architect himself, Norman Giller, and his 32-year-old granddaughter, Sarah Giller Nelson, an art and architectural historian. They have collaborated on a book which examines his work of over 10,000 buildings. The book is entitled Designing the Good Life.
I keep coming back to the war because that's a definite point in our history. And we were part of making history.
Here in Miami, everybody was just, you know, it was this sort of tropical paradise. And people came to Miami, people lived in Miami to get away from it all and to sort of revel in this celebration. And the architecture that my grandfather did, much like this hotel that we're sitting in, really very much you know, played with that and really sort of embodied that sense of play. You had circles and you had all these sort of kidney shapes and you had these angles and all of these different very playful elements that, you know, you took the sort of core of a very modern, simple building and then added these interesting design elements to really catch your eye.
Ira Giller is Norman Giller's son, who has also worked as an architect in the family business for his entire career. Sarah Giller Nelson is his daughter.
It was interesting in that I became the successor keeper of the architectural firm's records and information and photographs, and there were many items that I had been familiar with over the years and had long forgotten that we had buried in a file drawer. And as she began to cull through all of the information, discovered things that, as I say, I'd either long forgotten, and there were a few items that I never really knew about it, and then as my father commented on it, I learned in greater depth the stories of various buildings and various clients.
He designed about 70% of the motels here in Sunny Isles, and the success of those motels really translated. It was you know, other businessmen from other areas of the country often wanted to reproduce the success of the Miami Beach Motel, and so because he had become known for that, you know, they would often approach him. He did motels in Key West, he did motels all over Florida, he did motels even in New York, Montreal, places that you wouldn't even expect to have a motel, that certainly you wouldn't expect to have a Miami Beach style motel. There was, he did a few in Ohio, and so it was through that's sort of how the type got proliferated throughout the country.
In my opinion, I think that his greatest legacy were the motels of Sunny Isles, because that was really a whole art unto itself, and a lot of imagination and a lot of craft went into creating the motels of Sunny Isles.
The Thunderbird Motel is one of the few remaining Miami Modern motels in Sunny Isles. Sarah Giller Nelson gave us a personal tour of the Thunderbird, which is now a Days Inn.
Okay, and so I'm standing in front of what is actually the back of the main entrance pavilion of the motel, and you can see the roof line from here very clearly. It's in this sort of triangular form, and it's not perfectly symmetrical. And this was very typical of MiMo design, of modernist design in general, that you had the sense of asymmetry. And it was actually balanced by the tower that you see over here. The tower of guest rooms was placed so that it would balance out the sort of asymmetrical triangular roof line.
Sarah's tour continues with some other remaining Norman Giller architectural gems.
So I'm standing in front of one of the entrances to the North Shore bandshell, and how it was initially designed is that you have this disc that's sort of hovering, and it's positioned very low purposely. So as you walk under it, you get a sense that you are suddenly entering an enclosed space. But then as you continue through the entrance, the whole sky opens up, and you'll see the terrazzo on the floor also has circles embedded in it. And again, it was this play with different shapes and different forms, something that was a lot more striking than the average basic amphitheater. One of the things that I really like is the fact that these canopies they seem to sort of hover over the entire entrance, and you know, they're just supported by these two relatively small columns that are also slightly curved. I'm standing in front of the Shapiro House, and this house originated in the late 1940s when Mr. and Mrs. Shapiro approached my grandfather asking him to design for them a modern house. The interior of this house has very few right angles. The dining room is oval, the Florida room is triangular, and many of the other rooms on both floors are in very odd-shaped quadrangles. And so what's interesting is that from the outside, it's very difficult to tell that you have all of these unusual forms and shapes within.
Many of Norman Giller's buildings, along with the buildings of other MiMo architects, have been raised. Randall Robinson, who helped found this movement to preserve these architectural treasures, explains how such structures can be saved.
Just become involved in your community and weigh in on you know, what's going on around you as far as not just preserving things, but the new things that are getting built. And don't wait till it's too late, because a lot of people you know, become aware of things when they've already been approved and already started construction. And I think that the more informed people are, the better built environment that we'll have.